Hey, what's going on YouTube? Welcome back to episode 5 of our 1.18 survival let's play. In today's episode, I'm going to go over some of the plans we have for our new base, as well as starting to build some of our starter areas, I guess. Starter areas in air quotes because it's episode 5. So based off the image that's on screen now, we're going to start by building those 5 little squares, I guess you could call those squares, on the left side. That's going to end up being the Shire. In this is going to be, like our super smelter, storage area, some simple redstone farms that'll just kind of get the process going for us. And then once we have that all detailed out and finished, then we'll go ahead and start building Rivendell, which is going to be the first Lord of the Rings inspired base that we build. So the plans for that, as you can kind of see, is I'm going to end up building mountains all around and expanding the ones that we already have to build a real nice valley. And then up in the back of the valley, I'm going to build Rivendell itself. We actually have an end portal around there, which is perfect because we're going to end up building our base around that end portal pretty much. Then after that, I'm going to get into building some statues from the movies as well. And then once we finish this base, we're going to move on to the other sides of the mountains and build more Lord of the Rings inspired bases. Haven't decided what, where yet, but we'll get to that in a bit. Alright, so we start off this build by getting the proper spacing for our Hobbit hole. I like to build in odd increments, so our center gap here is going to be 5 blocks, and then each section of wall is going to be 3 blocks. It gives us a real nice curve for Hobbit holes, and as you'll see here in a second, I play with the design for a bit in order to get that curve. What I end up settling on is a stair in the top corner with slabs on either end of it, and it kind of just rounds it out just enough, especially for once we get more layers of depth in here and detail. It's a nice starting curve. The circular pattern is drawing inspiration definitely from the Hobbit holes in the movies. You always see those, they kind of like just dot the landscape there, and they have circular little windows and doors and whatnot. So inspiration definitely comes from there. As far as the roof goes, I like to go continue the curve and keep it nice and gradual. So I start with a full block and then go into a stair and into a half slab and then into a trap door. It gives it, as you'll see right here, it gives it a nice real round look to the roof, and really kind of fits the whole circular theme we're going for. So at this point in the video, I went back to spawn to get some building resources, and then came back with some diorite and calcite to build out our front facade. I really like the way the calcite and diorite kind of contrast with the spruce, and once we get more layers of depth and detail in here, you'll see how they clash, but they pair well, I think. So I play around with the textures on the outside to get something that I like, and that brings us to here. So at this point, I go ahead and mix in our polished diorite as well as some calcite, and that just helps break up the texture a bit. And I also go ahead and extend the right side by 3 blocks. It was looking a bit too stubby for my liking, so I think expanding it to one side makes it seem a bit longer and really just sets the scale, or helps set the scale real nice. So continue the theme, and then yeah, I think that's looking pretty good. So at this point, I go ahead and start to extend our terrain and make that look a bit more natural. Um, like I said earlier, all the Hobbit holes in the movies just kind of blend into the hill. So I try to do that here and just kind of make it look like a big dome around it. I think it turned out pretty well. Now, there was an image in the end credits of one of the Hobbit movies that inspired me a lot for this. Um, and the image had I tried searching for it earlier on the internet, but I can only find it in the end scene credits, and I don't quite want to screenshot those. So basically, the house had an exterior fireplace kind of on the end of it, and I thought that detail like really kind of made this look a little less uniform, a bit more natural. So I go ahead and start to add a fireplace, but I add it in the wrong spot, or I clear out the wrong spot to start. The placement just seemed a bit off. In the image itself, it was all the way on the outside of the building, but I think it fit a bit better in this case when it was on one of the inner panels, I guess. So pretty simple fireplace with a standard campfire on top, and then I left a couple spots empty so that I could add furnaces just to make it like an actual functional part of the build. And with that, our front is pretty much complete. I go ahead and repair some of the damages that I did throughout just to get it back looking nice again. Of course, mix in some polished granite to the furnace just to mix up the texture. And I tried to see if it would look nice with a little overhang, but I didn't like it, so I just went back to our normal roof slope there. Went ahead and repaired this side, and then yeah, that is our front facade complete. All right, so the time lapse at the beginning of the episode where we talked about our plans was actually me digging out the interior for this. A bit misplaced in terms of the timeline, but I needed some stock footage, and so it fit for that. So, like I said earlier, this is going to be our storage room. For the interior, I want to go with a pretty simple design. So what I'm going to do is start by clearing out the unnecessary blocks and then get it to a nice smooth stone texture. I don't need much detail in this just because it's going to be behind chests, so I'm not too worried about it. Once we get all this stone filled in, we go ahead and slab the top just so that I can put chests going all the way up. You could use stairs too, or just leave the block open, but I like to make the texture nice and uniform, so I went ahead and went for slabs. Alright, so then I went ahead and continued with the circle theme by adding the archway around the top portion. Like I said, I wanted to keep it pretty simple, so it didn't take me long to copy this throughout. I didn't quite care for it on the bottom, as I'm going to end up putting signs on these chests and item frames on some of them, and so I wanted to be able to get to as many as possible, but I still needed that design element. So we're just going on the top layer, and we're going to carry it around all sides of the logs, and yeah, the next shot will be a finished walkthrough of this. Alright, so I went ahead and added some fence around just to make it feel more enclosed. Added a smoker here and added some coal just to make it functional, and then as well as a pathway just to kind of mark out where we're going. Like I said, I didn't want to go crazy. Copy the design throughout. It was pretty easy. I moved all of the stuff I had over here into chests, and now I have the lovely task of going to spawn and bringing all the stuff I want from over there over into chests. Like I said, I didn't want to go too crazy, just a basic oak floor and stone ceiling. This building is going to be more of a infrastructure piece that'll help, set me up for the rest of my builds. So I didn't want to go too crazy on this. I just needed to get it up and running so that I could get into building everything else. Alright, so here we are a day later. All of my stuff is moved over, minus that pesky mending villager, because I didn't want to take him on a 1,000+ block journey through the nether. I do plan on bringing him over, though, and I need to name him. So go ahead and drop some name suggestions down below in the comments, and I'll get to that as soon as I can. But so once we have that done, I added a bit more infrastructure off camera, adding a sheep farm, a cow farm, as well as a pumpkin and wheat farm, or not pumpkin and wheat farm, a potato and wheat farm, just to kind of, set me up so I could have some food, get this thing going. So in the spirit of that, I needed a larger area to build more farms, and subsequently more hobbit holes. So in this time lapse, I'm trimming the hill back a bit just to open things up and get to a larger area. Modifying terrain, building hills, cliffs, mountains, it's my favorite thing to do in this game, so I had no problem getting to this. I would have done this even if I still had stone tools. I love it that much. The thing I don't love is the damn flowers. It makes creating terrain and filling things in that much harder. So before I get to placing, I go ahead and clear those out, and then I start adding dirt to flatten the area a bit, just to give us a nice clean work area. But don't you worry, it won't be too flat. I'll be going in later, adding some more detail, like ponds, bridges, and stuff like that, wheat farms, just so it doesn't look excessively flat. All right, here we are a day later. I'm going to continue the pathway through the Shire, and I'm sure, as you've noticed, there's a couple more hobbit holes that popped up. In a complete rookie move, I forgot to record them, so here's a pathway time lapse instead. As for the pathway that goes through the Shire, I'm going with something that's really simple, something that I've used in a lot of my survival worlds. Just a pretty basic stone, andesite, and gravel block palette. It's pretty simple, and I think it'll look really clean in here. I'll also probably dot some stone buttons throughout, just look like pebbles. That adds some nice ambiance, and I think it just looks really nice. So I'd also like to note that none of the hobbit holes actually have interiors, and there's a lot of terrain, as you can see on the right there, that's still unfinished. At this point in the video, at this point in building, I just kind of decided to half-ass the terrain until I get to building the mountains, and then once I'm building the mountains, I'll be, in the mood, and it'll all look nice and flow together. So for now, the Shire is going to look really good at certain angles, but pretty bad from others, so I'll try and just keep the good angles. Alright, so here's a walkthrough of all the hobbit holes we built. This first one here is going to end up being a villager breeder. Did that one with some copper and dark oak. I think it looks really nice. Continuing down our pathway here, our next hobbit hole is going to be a super smelter. Now, the design for this is no way canon correct. But I figured I'd try and change things up, make things look different by building this to be what the building's actually going to be used for. So yeah, first one's a super smelter. I like the way this design turned out. The dark oak and deep slate combo is amazing. Probably my favorite in 1.18. But yeah, so that's going to be the first one as a super smelter. Moving on to our next farm. This one is going to be an underground iron farm. As you can see, the interiors, of course, are nowhere near finished, but I'll get to that in a bit. I believe it's far enough away from our proposed villager breeder, so I don't think we should run into any issues with that. And then our final farm over here is going to be a sugarcane and bamboo farm. That'll probably be the first one I get up. It's really simple to make, and I love probably the outside of this one the most because it has 3 different wood types and 4 layers of depth. I really like the way this front facade turned out. Of course, I'm going to be detailing it more as time goes on, but really happy with the way it's going right now. Alright, to close off today's video, I want to end by building a cliff. Again, with the rookie mistakes, I didn't start the time lapse until I was about halfway through, but I'll add this clip anyways just to give a good idea of how I build cliffs. Like I said earlier, terrain's definitely my favorite thing to build, and when I do, I always try to make it semi-randomized. What I mean by that is I'll make sure that the texture is uneven and random, but I'll also follow patterns to make it look more natural. A prime example would be in the middle of that cliff there. You can see I kind of like curve the cliff a bit, and I match the curve between 2 different layers just to make it look kind of like even, but also like it was naturally generated, or like an actual piece of stone. I also always add at least 2 layers of dirt blocks on top. If you don't, then it just looks really weird because you have this big massive cliff and then just a tiny layer of dirt. So always add 2. If you see here, I end up doing 3. I might even go back and do a 4th layer just to make it look bulky and robust. Now, once I finish the rough design for the cliffs, I always go back and detail. As you see for this one, I did it with cobblestone, threw some boards in there, slabs, and stairs just to make things look a bit more dynamic. I also like to make these stones or boulders that kind of fall off to the front side, just to make the cliff look a bit more weathered. Looks like it's been there for a while, and it's had a rough go of it. That's going to do it for me today. Loving the progress we got going to the Shire here. Next video will definitely be more of building the actual farms, so I have a bit more substance. I'll definitely still do some detail. But yeah, loving the way this area is going. Can't wait to get to the rest of the Lord of the Rings themed builds. And as always, guys, if you enjoy this content, if you want to see more, go ahead and like and subscribe, and I'll see you then.